This is a very, very important conversation. What is mental health?
Mental health and mental illness are two completely different things. People don't treat mental health like that. It's almost like a taboo subject where they don't like to talk about it. Our parents maybe didn't talk about stuff. Talking about your feelings, especially as a bloke, oh, you're weak, you shouldn't be talking about these things. And it opens old wounds, but sometimes you have to confront them to move forward as well. If you're going to live in the past, you're going to stay in the past. There's still an issue with, if you like, toxic masculinity. It can be kind of quite an alien subject for you to branch out into.
Talk to me about that growth and that journey that you've gone through.
It was just an absolute nightmare, really. Close friends calling me saying, mate, I never even knew you were going through that. And then them saying to me, I've been through a similar sort of thing the last few years, but I never knew about it. Everybody's story and journey is slightly different. Not being able to see any like a positive. So stress can then cause anxiety. Anxiety can cause depression. So I'd be a catastrophizer and think of the worst case scenario every single time. It raised my anxiety levels. It made me question pretty much everything in my life.
What would be your one piece of advice for their next step? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the DaneMellowsTalks podcast. This is Talking Point, and today we've got a very, very exciting conversation coming up with Nick Minns. Now, Nick has gone through his own individual mental health journey, and he talks about that within this podcast. He talks about what you can do if you feel like you might be depressed, or you might have anxiety, or you have a lot of stress or worries, and if it goes further than that, then what you can do, who you can speak to, how he dealt with it in his journey. He talks about how social media and technology nowadays has a huge impact on our own mental health. We talk about how influencers impact our mental health. We talk about definitions and words that most people use in their day-to-day language but don't actually know what they mean. This is a very, very important conversation, and because of that, I will leave the phone numbers in the description to places like the Samaritans and places where you can go and get that help that you might need. With that being said, I hope that you do enjoy listening to this podcast. Nick is a great guy, and I had a really nice chat with him. And if this is your first time watching or listening to this podcast, then please leave a like, rating, and subscribe. If you are new, drop a comment on what you thought of this episode and what you've been thinking about episodes as of late. And also, if you're listening on Spotify, then please rate us 5 stars, because all that sort of stuff helps the podcast out more than you know. And obviously, the bigger the podcast gets, the better the guests can get. With that being said, please welcome Nick Minns. All right, Nick, I just wanted to start off with a big definition of mental health. What is mental health, and what does it mean to you?
So mental health for me is, it's basically like kind of your ability to deal with situations, i.e. just normal day-to-day living. And I suppose it's a different way to, if you like, to the standard norms which everybody maybe goes through. I think mental health gets tied in with mental illness, which through years of going through things and educating myself as well, turns out that mental health and mental illness are two completely different things. But
Could you give us a definition on how they're different for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, so for me, mental health is kind of, if you like, your standard sort of mental health conditions are things like depression, anxiety, worries. They're all kind of your general anxiety. They're all your kind of mental health issues. But then you get your mental illnesses. Now, your mental illnesses can go into things like schizophrenia, bipolar. You're talking manic states of depression with suicidal tendencies. You're also looking at illnesses such as bulimia nervosa, which is obviously an anorexia nervosa, which is, again, it's kind of a dissociation with food and, your body image as well. And these things like psychosis, where kind of hearing voices as well is quite a big one. So mental health is sometimes gets mixed in, people say I'm mentally ill, but I think there is genuine people who suffer from kind of like severe mental illnesses. I mean, me myself, struggled with depression and anxiety for probably most of my life. Not really kind of known about it, or well, I've known about it probably, but just put it to the back of my mind for
Mm-hmm.
an awfully long time especially in my adult life. But it was kind of because I started going through that thing of, oh, does this mean that I'm mentally ill? But when you actually look into it, it's more of a mental health condition, and it's knowing when to get the right help as well. I mean, with mental health, very much similar to physical health. If you sprain your ankle, or if you have a cut, or you do something to yourself in physical health, you get the help, or you put a band-aid on it. If you people don't treat mental health like that, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like a taboo subject where they don't like to talk about it, to be either stigmatized or have individuals make perceptions about them.
So with seeking out the help, do you have maybe a message for anyone who needs to make that step and go for that mental band-aid as opposed to that physical one for when you have the cuts and bruises and everything? Do you have any advice on taking that maybe first step, or trying to narrow down which direction of special help that they can get?
I think the first thing is you need to be ready, and you need to be in a position where you're accepting of that. Do you know what? I'm in a position where I believe that I need some help. I think there's a lot of people who are afraid to speak out, for the fact that if they speak out, they'll just be dismissed, or they might be labelled. And there's a lot of things in past with like media, the way it's been portrayed on TV, and even down to the way that we've been brought up by our parents as well. Especially sort of my generation, it's our parents maybe didn't talk about stuff because it just wasn't the thing to talk about, and anything talking about your feelings, especially as a bloke, was seen as, oh, you're weak, you shouldn't be talking about these things. But when you get to that position, and I think when you've reached that point where, right, I need to look for help, and I need to reach out, I need to speak to somebody. And that somebody could be really anybody. It could be a friend, could be a partner, a family member, could be things like the Samaritans, these talking services. If you feel like you're in a crisis and you can't cope, there is crisis lines that you can call. You can even go to the A&E department now for the vast majority of kind of mental health issues, and you can talk to those. And just talking to a doctor, a professional, it was a massive change, like turning point for myself. But I'd got to a point where I felt like I'd ignored it for too long and not talked.
Mm-hmm.
Where now I've almost become like an advocate for talking about it, because when I actually talked about it, it really opened up like avenues. And don't get me wrong, it does open up kind of doors to other things which you've maybe been avoiding, or that you haven't really recognized, and it opens all wounds. But sometimes you have to confront them to move forward as well. So there is that thing of living in the past.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to live in the past, you're going to stay in the past. You sometimes need to confront those things from the past to be able to move forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you mentioned then about mental health as a guy, as a bloke. What is the stigma around that, and have we evolved to the point where it should be treated as the same? It should be, guys should be as open to everybody else talking about it.
I think as a society, and I think we are getting better at it, but there's still an issue with, if you like, toxic masculinity
Mm-hmm.
and, those issues with being seen, if you, say for example, if you're not earning a certain amount and you're not driving a real posh car and you haven't got this many followers on YouTube or on TikTok or whatever, you're seen as a failure. And sometimes those expectations are set too high. And men as well, kind of again, like generate. I think the current generation coming forward are probably going to be better suited for the future, because I think in the old generations coming through, it's been very much, if you're a man, you're a provider, you're a protector,
Mm-hmm.
you bring on the bacon, you work. Whereas, now we're living in a society where it's equal rights. And let's put it this way, women do talk so much better about their feelings. It comes out just in general conversation, whereas men, you almost have to pull it from,
Mm-hmm.
from like how they're actually feeling. And I think with men as well, they tend to bottle stuff up. They tend to sit on those emotions a lot more, and suppress them instead of actually giving into them. And I mean, I just had a conversation today with a friend of mine who was going through a bit of a tough patch, and it's it's crazy to think he's going through something that I've gone through as well. But he's going through exactly the same thing I was maybe 3 years ago, of this thing as, oh well, I can't talk about it. And also not even knowing how to deal with it as well. And I think if you haven't been given those tools from a parent, or you haven't gone through it or seen anybody who's gone through it, it can be kind of quite an alien subject for you to branch out into.
So going from this is yourself now, going from where you was at one point in your life to now you've got your own podcast, you've got the Bearded Podcast to talk about these mental health situations and getting people to the point where they can say that they've got a positive mental health. Talk to me about that growth and that journey that you've gone through.
Well, I mean, a little bit of backstory, but back in 2020, that's when I had like almost like a nervous breakdown. I ended up having to come out of work. I was just in a really, really like bad place with myself, like really depressed, anxious, going through several bouts of health anxiety, almost kind of just being afraid of my own shadow and just catastrophizing everything that was going on in my life. So thinking, the worst is going to happen every day. Fearing of dying, fearing of, because that's the thing as well. Like I kind of felt like I was quite lucky in a way that I never had those suicidal ideologies, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, because I was going through health anxiety, and the health anxiety actually stopped me from doing anything in that sort of way.
Right.
And life's always felt quite precious to me. And I went through CBT, and this is all during lockdown as well. So obviously, I had health anxiety on top of the fact that we'd just gone into a global pandemic,
Oh
which was
wow, yeah.
just an absolute nightmare, really. But at the same time, it made me stop as well. So as much as lockdown was not the best thing, because it kind of took me away from my mum and my dad, who I'd cared for quite a bit, but it made me stop and actually take stock of what was going on with me. So it actually allowed me to get back into the family unit and be able to address some issues that were going on with CBT. And I managed to have a bit of CBT with health anxiety, which was successful. And then I went back on to have CBT for depression straight afterwards. And it was funny, kind of, I'd started having conversations with some of my friends and going for socially distanced walks and doing quiz nights and stuff and talking about things. And I remember just after Christmas, I was thinking, oh, well, what I might do is do a blog,
Mm-hmm.
about what's gone on with me. But I was, I'm a bit crap at writing, so I'm not the best at kind of getting things down and articulating them in that sense. So talking was a lot more at my kind of street.
Yeah.
And I just made the decision of, oh, do you know what? I think I'll give a podcast a try. And at first it was just me talking about my my kind of journey from 2020 to the beginning of 2021. So it was like that year's journey. And I just thought if I could share what I'd gone through with some, with everyone, and if it could help one person feel not as alone and not as isolated and as down as what I felt, and also to kind of feel like, yeah, you know what, it's normal to have these feelings. That was what it was, and it still is, like even now. And I mean, clicking publish for that first podcast was, I was scared to do it because again there was that kind of anxiety of, God, I'm going to put this and I'm going to get loads of things on social media from people saying, oh, you're weird, you're this, you're a nut job, and all these kind of derogatory things which sometimes get chucked about. But I was just really surprised, and I think really thankful for the kind of support that I got through it, and close friends calling me saying, mate, I never even knew you were going through that. And then them saying to me, I've been through a similar sort of thing the last few years, but I never knew about it. So just by me opening up and, I suppose, showing a little bit of vulnerability, actually allowed people to drop their guard down and be able to talk about it as well. And I mean, then it's the podcast has kind of gone on from there really, and went to having guests on. Still do the odd couple of solo podcasts, but I think we're nearing about 97 now on the podcast episodes, and I've been lucky enough to speak to people from all over the world as well. I mean, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the US. It's been absolutely amazing to be able to kind of have those conversations with individuals who have gone through a very similar journey to me. And it's interesting to hear the stories, because people can, I suppose, no two stories are the same. You can go through similar things, but everybody's story and journey is slightly different.
Yeah, and like you say, to have that positive response in like comparison to what in your head you was thinking it could have been, is such like a reflection of the world that we're living in now. How you say it used to be one way, and now we're slowly transitioning into a much more like positive outlook on mental health. But obviously there are still some confusion around like certain terms that get thrown out a lot nowadays, like anxiety and depression and stress and things like that. So could you help us understand the differences between those, what are now becoming like very common phrases that people are using?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I probably used to say it when I was a kid, and a lot of people did. Is they go, when they feel a bit low, they go, "Oh, so depressed," without really knowing, like, God, what actually depression is. And depression is this kind of feeling of, it's very much a mixture of all different emotions, such as anxiety is in there, stress is in there, worry is a big one, but also the kind of not being able to see any like a positive, low self-esteem. You've got a low self-perception of yourself. I mean, I went through a huge amount of self-loathing back in 2021, kind of coming out of the back end of my first lot of CBT with depression, and it was kind of a real difficult time. I didn't like the way I looked. I didn't like this, didn't like that. I was just, I always thought, God, you're a failure. And you do go through these patterns of these thought patterns with depression. I mean, anxiety is, I mean, everybody suffers stress, and anxiety really is the body's way and the mind's way of preparing you for a situation which I suppose may or may not happen. everybody's going to have anxiety, say, for example, about flying on a plane, or, if it's something that they've never really done before. It's almost like that, that's your body's natural reaction. It's when it gets unhelpful with those worries then branch into everything that you do, i.e., say, for example, my anxiety got so bad at one point when my dad was kind of, his health wasn't very good, that I actually ended up not getting, or if I was going to move jobs, I was looking for a job. So my anxiety was that bad that I felt like I needed to be there, that I actually, when I was looking at jobs, I was actually mapping out what times it would take to get from one place to the next, ringing up for taxi firms and asking them, how long on a busy day would I wait for a taxi, looking at bus routes, timing myself walking from one place to another. It got that obsessive. And, that's when it, that kind of natural anxiety turns into something that's a lot more unhelpful for your body and for your mind, because there's obviously a lot of physical sensations, which is also kind of show themselves, such as, clammy palms, raised heartbeat, dizzy spells, bit of nausea, butterflies in your stomach. Stress at the moment, obviously, with everything that's been, going on in the world at the minute, with, I think stress is out there for a lot of people. But it's also, stress is obviously like your general worries in life. And it's stress can be caused through many different things. It can be caused by poor diet, poor appetite, life choices, drinking, substance abuses. It could be financial, addiction, all these different things. And it's funny how everything sort of circles round and feeds into each other as well. So stress can then cause anxiety. Anxiety can cause depression. Depression can then sometimes flare up bouts of something else, and they all kind of feed into each other. But I think when you actually, so I've just found out that one of the big things that I had was worry. Now, I never really looked at worry as something, I just thought of stress and anxiety. But worry is one of those things where it can then start to escalate forward and become really unhelpful. So I'd be a catastrophizer and think of the worst case scenario every single time. And because I do that, it'd raise my anxiety levels, which would then get me stressed, which would then make me feel low about myself, because then I'd have a poor perception of how I was, say, acting within the household, as a dad, as a husband, as a friend. It made me question pretty much everything in my life. And just by actually getting control of one thing has actually made like a real detrimental difference to the other things. Right. So it's sometimes learning about these things more and not being afraid of them has been a big thing for me moving forward.
So someone who's listening to this now, that they might have really resonated with what you've just said there, and they've thought, what, that's exactly what I'm like, especially in terms of worrying about things as well, because I think that is really, really common with a lot of people. What would be your one piece of advice for their next step in that? Would it be to take control of that one thing and then take one thing at a time, or would it be something else?
Is this like with worry, would you say?
Yeah, more down on the worry route.
So something that I've learned in the last couple of sessions, actually, which has been really, really helpful, is actually, so say, for example, if I'm worrying about something that's going to happen in a couple of weeks, but I've got no control over it. See, I used to let me worry about that all the time. But what you sometimes have to do is think, right, that worry, can I do anything about that now? Is there anything I can do about that now? If you can't do anything about it now, think, right, do you know what? I'm not going to worry about that now. I'm going to give it a couple of days and then I'll have a think about that. It's almost like giving yourself time to worry,
Mm-hmm.
because what you can do is you can worry about something too much, and then it gets in the way of other things, and then that other thing becomes then a worry on top of a worry. Whereas if the things that are out of your control, or they're a few weeks away or a few days away, and you could just park that for a little bit and deal with the things in the moment, it's definitely been something I've that's helped me, especially with like uni work, because I try and juggle all the different bits of uni work and everything and do them all at once.
Yeah.
But instead of just thinking, right, well, that presentation, I'm in a place where now I need to talk to my tutor about it. Right, let's part that one for now. Let's deal with this one. This one's coming up first. Let's deal with this. So that's been a big kind of a big leap forward in the way that I've
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely dealt with things. It's kind of, say, giving yourself a little bit more time to worry in a more structured way as well, because everybody's going to have worries, but you know, it's trying to deal with everything all at once. You know, you're only human, you can't do it.
I think that is some really, really good advice there. I think I've heard something a little bit similar before, where they said give yourself like a specific time of the day to worry, and it's like
Yeah.
4:15. Yeah, and then it'll come round to that time. So it's out of your mind until then. It comes round to that time, and you're like, well, actually, it's been solved now, or maybe it's like I can push it back a little bit further, sort of thing. And it's that whole idea of out of control, out of mind.
Yeah, exactly.
So with technology, I know is a big thing at the moment. Technology and social media, especially with all of that growing, and it's furthering concerns about people and the mental health. How do you think we can strike a healthy balance between using technology while also maintaining the mental well-being?
I suppose, I mean, technology is one of those where there's a lot of people who live their life on, if you like, online. You know, for some
Mhm.
people that's a business choice. Some people that's, oh, they follow that. But say for example, they'll be following influencers, and you know. But I think the biggest thing is to realize sometimes when trying to follow those influencers is you've also got to think of like their background as well. So say for example, for me, I mean, I absolutely love listening to Stephen Bartlett, the
I'm
Diary
the
of a
same, yeah.
CEO.
Diary of a
Absolutely
CEO
brilliant.
podcast, yeah.
But I don't ever think to myself, God, I'm going to be as big as Stephen Bartlett. I'm going to, it's more of a, well, do you know what? Yeah. The whole way he does his podcast is obviously he's got a nice big studio, but he's got a bit of money to do it as well.
Mm,
But that isn't exactly where my podcast was, where I wanted my podcast to go. I just wanted my podcast to come across and just be a kind of almost like a self-help tool for people. That's what I wanted it to be. And I think people need to, if they're gonna have kind of an identity online, they need to be true to themselves, not to kind of please other people. They also need to, I mean, depending on what you do online, you also need to be careful of you're always going to get negative comments from somewhere. And that is one of the flip sides of how negative social media can be. And I think as well being mindful of the being mindful of not just the content, if you're a creator, what the content you're creating, but also the content that you're taking in as well.
mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of people who watch stuff which is not really what they should be doing, especially if they're feeling low, or they're not feeling very good with themselves. And I mean that you need to kind of then start looking at things like self-help and the relevant things which you need to look at, and find online, find a bit of a hobby. I mean, one of my hobbies online, I know it sounds a bit big, but is wrestling from like the 90s and like
Nice.
the early
Yeah, yeah.
2000s. I was massive into like wrestling, and I kind of got out of that for a while, but that's now become something where, you know, if I ever just feel right, I'll just watch a bit of that. Or,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
just finding somewhere where it's just a bit easy watching, where you don't have to kind of think too much about it. And obviously I still watch other bits and bobs with like mental health, and you know, there's loads of amazing people out there who are doing great things on Instagram, and you know, putting content out there which is all in support of mental health, and things are moving forward. But I think
Hmm.
as a creator, you need to be mindful of what you're putting out, and as someone who's taking in it all the time, you just need to be aware and be conscious of what you're watching and how that's making you feel.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's some really good advice there, especially the bit of having that little bit of an escape with you watching the wrestling from the 90s.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, just having something enjoyable that you can just do for yourself.
I think when you're younger, you kind of you still, oh, I want to be like this, I want to be
Yeah,
like that,
of
and
course.
but when you actually start really thinking about it, you know, you as much as you'd like to be like them, you're never going to be them. So you might as well just be the best you can be, you know, and what that looks like will, you know, that'll be completely personal to you. But yeah, just be the best you can be.
Amazing. Well, Nick, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's been really great to talk to you today, and I'm sure everyone listening has learned so much and taken in a lot from this conversation.
Oh man, honestly, thanks so much. It's not always I get the chance to kind of do being a guest, so it's
Yeah,
it's a real change. It's nice. It's lovely.
a nice little turnaround.
Yeah, definitely.